And may you, friends, hear the words the Lord would have you hear. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. You can see it. So, as Americans, there are things I can say that pull on a thread for all of us that relate to who we are as a people. Right? So if I were to say, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and so on and so forth, you're immediately in the Constitution, our formative document as a culture and as a society. Yes? And if I said, I have a dream that my 4 little children may one day sit down at a table, you know immediately we're in the civil rights movement, and that I have a dream speech by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., right? We're there. Another formative time for our culture and our society. And words can do that. Small images can do that. They can draw us back to who we are as a people, and that's what's happening today, in today's gospel story. But something important happens here that we sometimes don't notice. Today we celebrate the last Sunday of Epiphany and the Transfiguration. And that story of Jesus going up on the mountain contains all kinds of little tags, both for the early Christians who were Jews who converted to Christianity, and for us in our turn. Jesus' face was shining, just as Moses' face had shone when he gave the commandments. I confess I've always wondered about that. It sounds a little creepy. I mean, could they see the veins and the bones under the skin? One guy would like that to wear a veil, that's for sure. I don't know. But Jesus' face shining pulls them back to that Exodus story when they hear it, those early Christians. And the 2 men, Moses and Elijah, the 2 iconic prophets for their society, are talking with Jesus. And it's interesting that Peter says, let's build a booth here, booths being an important aspect of worship and that dispersed society, and yet they say, and he didn't know what he was saying. Those dazzling white clothes, also evocative of iconic images for them. So the Christians that heard that first story, when they finally heard it, because the disciples didn't come down and tell it right away, the first Christians that heard that immediately were centered in their heritage, which was also Jesus' heritage. Right? And when we hear it, it does the same thing for us. The Peter, James, and John, full of fear, falling down to the ground when the cloud comes, just like the shepherds did. Right? And lots and lots of imagery. This is my son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Calls to mind Jesus' baptism. With these words, we're called back to our identity as Christian people. Because we depend on Jesus the Messiah, the glorified Christ, for our identity. If that's not the truth of what we proclaim and live, I want my money back. Right? We are one of the worst social clubs in the world, with all the do's we have, all the don'ts we have and the do's we don't have. Right? I mean, there's a reason why we gather, why we worship. Because of Jesus. If that's not true, we should all be singing him. That's who we are, yes? That's who we are. That's the crux of the matter for us. That Jesus is the Christ. And all of that story, that mountaintop story, reminds us of his glory. It reminds us of who he is. day yet. That's not the whole revelation of Christ. And we can't depend on that as the whole revelation of Christ. Today we hear a story that has contrasts. Vibrant, clear contrasts. There's the man who goes up on the mountain and the little boy in the dirt rolling around and shrieking. That's the whole revelation. Because Jesus comes down the mountain and kneels in the dirt with that little boy and heals him and restores him to his father. Two sons, one up on the holy hill, one rolling in the dirt. Two sons, one is Son of Man, my chosen. One is unnamed and unspeaking. One father says, "This is my chosen, listen to him." And the other father calls out, "Look at my son," because no one wants to. Vital and important contrast. One is called Master, Lord, Teacher, while the other is broken, controlled by an evil he cannot understand, he cannot master. A frightening, intractable, unable to be healed evil. What's that contrast pointing to? What's the meaning of both of these as the revelation of Christ? It's not about showing one against the other. It's about understanding the flow of energy between the two. It's about understanding the whole. In this case, in this story, Jesus is both the exalted Messiah and the healer kneeling in the dirt. And we follow that whole story. And we are called to that whole revelation. Not just the glory, but kneeling in the dirt with broken children and restoring them to their parents. They're inextricably joined. We cannot parse them. We cannot divide them. We must not emphasize one over the other. Rather, we must carry both. You faithless and perverse generation, how much longer must I be with you and bear with you, says the man who is God. Bring your son here, says the God who is man. That's transfiguration. That's revelation. Not just on a holy mountain where the chosen few remain silent, but down in the dirt where everyone can see and all are amazed at God's glory. That's the revelation of Christ. This present, active, healing reservation, even dying revelation, is in solidarity with those who are hurt, who suffer the most. Jesus, whose face changes as he prays, who shines like the sun, who talks with prophets, will be completely vulnerable with those who are hurting. And he will be completely vulnerable with us when we are hurting. And in that most horrible time in our lives, when we are awash in things we can't understand, can't master, can't find healing for, Jesus will be there. Jesus will come. He will reach out and tenderly touch us and hold us, and we will be made whole. But it doesn't stop there, because the other revelation is that nothing will be allowed to come between us and his love, not even death. Nothing will come between us and God in Christ. So what does that mean for us? As a people of hope, we are healers. As a people of revelation, we show God's glory in the dirt with those who are most hurting, whether it be each other or others who come to us. And it's revealed in story after story of Scripture that God works most where we are most vulnerable. The weakest, the most foolish, the most broken things about us are where God's revelation is the most powerful. It rises up like the fragrance of an expensive perfume. It means that we can stop pretending to be fine. It's okay that we're not fine. God has our back, and we have each other's backs. It's okay that we are vulnerable and broken when that happens. It's okay because others will reach out to us in God's love, and God will show up, and our brokenness will be healed. When one turns to the Lord, the veil is removed. Lent is coming. Next Wednesday it starts, and it's that season when we take our greatest weaknesses and offer them to God. For God to use as a witness to others. For God to transform. So I encourage you, this Lent, to pick one. Besides giving up chocolate and coffee, Facebook, pick a weakness, something that really stings, something that really bothers you about yourself, and offer it to God every day. Every day. Look at me, say to God. Look at me where you're needed. And let God act in that weakness. So often we call on each other for our gifts, as we should do. I hope we're all offering our gifts to this group. We need every person's gifts. But to God, let's offer these weaknesses and let Him turn them into gifts and transform us. Lent is a time when we can cry out to God, I beg you to look at my. Cry out in prayer, in silence, by drawing, by writing, by dancing, by walking, however you cry out with your own heart and watch what happens. Because Christ, who is Messiah, is your suffering servant. It means one more thing. We have to get dirty. We're called to kneel in the dirt and see fully people who are broken and love them fully and ally with them fully. The people that no one wants to see, we're called to interact and love them and heal them. And when Christians do this together, everyone sees the glory of God. We should do it not just in a season, but as a habit of life. I recommend, actually, that you look at our people in brown if you want to see how that's done as a habit of life. Sorry, Franciscans. Y'all didn't know you'd be in the sermon. But when we do that, we are visible. We're vulnerable. Others see us as we are, and they become unafraid to be who they are. And we're there for each other. As the Lord lives, as you yourself live, I will not leave you. That is the cry of Christians to each other throughout the ages. And the veil drops, and we find we are freed. Together we show the glory of God. And Paul says, all of us, with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit.